Did we call him? It's all about truth. All of it. Every single thing. All boils down to the truth. We all want truth. The truth will set you free. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. This is Press for Truth Live. I am your host, Dan Dykes. Today is Tuesday, March the 22nd, 2016. And ladies and gentlemen, Brussels is currently on lockdown. This is, of course, following terrorist attacks that occurred this morning. Two attacks back-to-back, about an hour apart. One at an airport in Brussels, another at the metro station. And now today we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at this, but I want to analyze this, taking a bit of a step back, because we have to look at the bigger picture here in regards to what's been going on, especially over even within the last week. We have to remember that it was only just a few days ago, folks, where one of the only suspects captured in the terrorist attack in Paris from November 13th was just captured in Brussels only a few days ago. This is here from the BBC. Paris attacks. Salah Abdeslam's luck runs out. The capture of Europe's most wanted man alive is an immense boost for the Franco-Belgian investigation team, who have been on the trail of Salah Abdeslam for months now. Although he was shot during his dramatic arrest on a street in Molenbeek, his wounds are not serious, and police will be desperate to interrogate the only key suspect caught since the November 13th gun and bomb attacks. Senior Belgian ministers were delighted the 4-month manhunt was over, and they will hope a decisive blow has been dealt to the so-called Islamic State's network of hideouts and sleeper cells in Belgium. But many questions remain unanswered. Who masterminded the Paris attacks? Who is still at large? And are there more groups and more attacks planned? Well, sadly, folks, the answer to that question has been answered today. Indeed, more attacks have been planned, and it looks like these sleeper cells have awoken. In fact, not only did this just take place a few days ago, we even have the president of Turkey, Erdogan, also suggesting just a few days ago that Brussels could be seeing an attack. This comes out here from ABC News. Turkish leader, Kurdish militants could also hit Europe. It says here, speaking at a ceremony, Erdogan said, "There is no reason why the bomb that exploded in Ankara cannot explode in Brussels or in any other European city. The snakes you are sleeping with can bite you at any time." And he actually mentioned Brussels by name just a few days ago, suggesting that these sleeping cells may awaken and launch an attack. And indeed, that is what took place. And did they ever? Terror in the terminal. Chilling footage shows the moment the passengers cower under desks and run for their lives after suicide bomb blasts rock Brussels airport in a series of ISIS attacks that have killed 34. And folks, the images and the videos that is surfacing now is quite traumatic and quite troubling, as you can see here as we're scrolling through. There was the simultaneous attack, 2 explosions going off at the airport. They have a diagram here showing where multiple explosions went off in these various terminals, and then another one at the metro station. So, it begs the question too, what is the reaction going to be to this? And we're already seeing a huge reaction, not just in Brussels. I am quite amazed at how the Canadian authorities, believe it or not, have been responding to this, even right here in Vancouver. We have them beefing up security now in response to the attack in Brussels. We now have more police at the airports. We have more police in the Vancouver metro transit systems. Bomb-sniffing dogs now are becoming all a part of the norm today in response to this. So here's a couple articles here from Van City. Security increased at Vancouver's International Airport after Brussels attacks. Here's another one. More police officers on the SkyTrains and sea buses in the wake of the Brussels attacks. So we're seeing an increase of the police state here. And as I said, how are we going to see the reaction to this around the world? How's the PC culture going to react to this? I mean, we've already been seeing the clash, the reaction and the clash taking place in Europe with these types of things. In fact, we have a clip from, I think it's 60 Minutes in Australia, who was out in Sweden, and they were recently attacked by, I believe it was Somali migrants in a very dangerous part of town that's essentially being taken over. And it begs the question, what on earth is going on here? You know, how are people going to deal with this? And then when we come back from this clip, we're going to be joined in studio, on the line rather, with our guest today, Aaron Dykes of Truth Stream Media, to help us, you know, break all this down, exactly what's going on over there in Europe and how people are going to react to it over here as well. So here's a clip from 60 Minutes over in Australia being attacked by these Somali immigrants. And when we come back from the clip, we'll be joined on the line by Aaron Dykes of Truth Stream Media. Here's the clip.
For all its generosity, Sweden is now grappling with communities of disaffected migrants who can't find jobs and have few prospects. The country's image was shattered 3 years ago when riots broke out in the Stockholm suburb of Husby. There are now 55 declared no-go zones in Sweden, where police have to escort ambulances to ensure their safety. And as we found out, the temperature is similar in the suburb of Rinkeby, home to mostly Somali migrants. Within minutes of us arriving, a group of young men make it clear we're not wanted and deliberately run down our cameraman.
Whoops! Nej men vad fan!
Hey, 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 hey.
Go on! Shit! What happened to your leg?
You went out your foot. Are you all right?
It's a little more hostile than I had anticipated.
Okay, welcome to Rinkeby. It's also called Little Mogadishu.
And is that what you're worried about for the future of Sweden? That clash, this clash?
Yes, of course. Now, one of your film crew members was run over by a car here, and it took us 1.5 minutes. So
yes, we're literally just out of the car, and aggression.
And they didn't have any reason to do that, did they?
No, well, definitely not.
No.
We call the police.
To be honest, we hadn't anticipated such intense aggression. Our cameraman was literally...
And even they fear their presence will be provocative.
I think it's better if you go in without us, because I think it would be...
very aggressive.
Yeah, if
okay,
we're young. So we will stay here, and if it is...
That's fine.
You watch us.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Majority here are Muslims from East Africa, and they don't assimilate well into the Swedish culture and society, and they're unemployed, and they're poor. So you add all these factors together, and their youth are feeling marginalized and don't speak Swedish very well, so they don't get jobs or get into the Swedish youth culture either.
But not everyone is hostile.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my cousin lives in Melbourne.
Many locals are polite and friendly and happy to talk.
It's good.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
But what happened next changed everything. The police leave, and as we prepare to go, young men masking their faces arrive.
Good, you're doing good.
You're doing good?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Take it easy.
Okay, you too.
And attack.
Go! Go! Don't you touch me! What you gonna do?
Excuse me. Please, please.
Get out of here.
No, we are leaving, but you don't need to hurt us. There's no need to be unkind.
You can't film. You can't film. No, don't do it.
The gang's attention turns when a local intervenes and drives his mobility scooter into the most violent attacker.
Move. We've been individually attacked. Soundman has been punched, the producer's been punched, you've been run over, the cameraman. We've all been assaulted and insulted. It's best we leave.
So there you have it, folks. They were essentially forced to flee and to leave there, and I think it's quite clear that things are slowly changing. Things are becoming different there in Europe. And joining us now on the line to help us break all this down is Aaron Dykes of Truth Stream Media. Aaron, man, thanks so much for joining us here today on Press for Truth Live.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan.
Now, I originally had you on to kind of talk about the PC movement, the current politically correct culture of all these feminists and social justice warriors, being offended by everything. But then, of course, the news broke today that there were these attacks in Brussels. So I want to get your thoughts on how this potentially plays into this PC culture, or what these people are going to make of this if it does. But first of all, break it down a little bit of your analysis. What, in your opinion, is going on there in Brussels?
Well, as far as the terror attacks themselves, I think I've been too far down the road. It's difficult for me to just take it at face value. Of course, it seems to go hand in hand with this migration crisis and all the tensions that have been brewing in Europe and around the world. They've been working on new security bills and just basically building in and fully baking the police state into Europe. But at the same time, you've got academics who are inside the Beltway and inside of this global system who've been writing and prescripting the clash of civilizations for several decades now, particularly since the fall of the Soviet Union. People like Samuel P. Huntington, people like Brzezinski, and they've known this is pretty much the new fracture point. And I think it goes a long way in partially explaining why they seem to be forcing an integration of cultures that really just don't know each other and are not going to get along, especially when what they know about each other is the lowest common denominator. And xenophobia is always in play, but I think really what they're trying to do is break down national sovereignty, break down national identities, which have already kind of been distorted in Europe through the European Union, and really just confuse people, I think. It seems to be part of the plan. You've got Bilderberg people, who I know you follow, Dan, in particular Peter Sutherland, who's right now the UN's migration chief. And he's openly said a couple of years ago now, but just as relevant, that he wants to break the homogeny in Europe, inside the United Kingdom, inside the major countries in Europe, and pretty much open it up to becoming so multicultural that countries can't be said to speak for themselves anymore. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, well, absolutely. This forced multiculturalism, we're seeing it as well. And I guess it begs the question, Aaron, is Islam essentially compatible with the West or with Europe, essentially, if there is going to be this slow integration? Is this possible? Is it really compatible with the ideologies of the West?
I don't know. It's not really something I've studied in depth in terms of the actual faith. I've met lots of people from all cultures, including Islamic people, and I've had problems with very few individuals of any background, and yet they seem to have fault lines and push buttons to get societies at each other's throats. Do I have a huge personal vendetta even in the United States against people of opposite political parties? Usually not, sometimes maybe. But then when really the conversation is bigger and it's you got to choose between this and that, it's pretty easy to get people at each other's throats. And since the system pretty much wants to brew that chaos so they can have their order out of chaos as a result, I think it just looks like an easy bake 1, 2, 3 step.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think about, as you alluded to before, the suggestion from ISIS that they're going to be embedding themselves amongst these influx of refugees? And now I think that's a lot of where the controversy surrounds, is that a lot of people are aware of this, that ISIS announced flat out that they are going to embed some of their operatives within some of these refugees. And now it seems that what they have suggested is unfolding. Is that how you see it? I mean, are they doing exactly what they said they were going to do?
I think it's inevitable that Europe was going to see more attacks with the level of fear of migration that's going on there and the volume of people pouring in. But I still see a lot of provocation behind the scenes. On the international stage in Syria, Putin has pretty much checked the U.S. and its allies' moves in Syria and their attempts to use Syria as a domino to force an Iran war and a wider regional war, and has pretty much called them on the phony ISIS threat, the buildup, the funding, the training, the use of Turkey, the use of Saudi, the use of Israeli money, and they're having to kind of bring back the face of ISIS and keep the attacks in people's minds to make sure they're focused on what I think is largely a concocted external enemy. I think for everything that's true about terrorists and radicals, I think they've poured in a lot of the script and led people to make assumptions to the media. How much of this is really happening? How many of the people involved in the actual attacks are going to turn out to have been members of intelligence organizations?
Yeah, well, that was always. My next question is what aspect or element of this could essentially be a false flag? And as somebody yourself who's been researching false flags for a very, very long time, we know that the intelligence communities, the CIA, the Mossad are often very heavily involved with this. Is it possible that this is another false flag operation created by the intelligence agencies to create this destabilization and then to offer their solution, which is more control of the Middle East?
I think it's definitely possible, and I think it's the historical record, but particularly if this attack among all attacks lead to a major change, I think that opens up the reasons for looking at it in hindsight and being very highly suspicious. We know that practically every provocation, at least for U.S. wars, has been a false flag. 9/11 is such a heavily discussed topic. And, at the same time, I think the Obama years, it's become very diffuse. They didn't talk as much about the terrorism threat. And a lot of the events that happened, again, particularly in the U.S., but we've been seeing them more in Europe, have been smaller scale. So fewer people are pouring themselves into the details and looking deeply into the connections, which I'm sure can be found. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Paris attacks were different. They were very much in the global eye. People paid very close attention to that. But look, I don't even know if you saw, but just in the past couple of weeks, the singer from Eagles of Death, I think the band is, came forward to say, hey, I think there were suspicious people operating that stage. They weren't acting the way they should. When running an event, they seem suspicious. I think they should be looked into. And very quickly, within a matter of days, he was presumably pressured into retracting his statement. I think they have moved forward now with other events to make sure that no one event will have all the focus of skeptics and critics and conspiracy theorists, if you will.
Right, because, people are picking up on these things and they are being able to expose these things for what they are. This we have here from ABC News, what you were talking about there, Paris attacks, Eagle of Death metal singer Jesse Hughes apologizes for his inside job claim. And he says here in a statement, I humbly beg forgiveness from the people of France, the staff and security of the Bataclan, my fans, family, and friends, and anyone else hurt or offended by the absurd accusations I made in my Fox Business Channel interview. My suggestions that anyone...
I got to stop you there. Yeah. Just laugh. Offended at... why is the burden on people not to speak out and ask questions when lives are at stake? And no one's saying he's insulting the victims. I don't know anyone who's asked legitimate questions and tried to probe this or any other terror attacks and thought, well, those victims deserve it. They were terrible people by default. Of course not. And yet, if we have a society where you can't even ask critical questions about the very things that are supposed to be so important in the political debate, we don't have a really open society. And of course, it's being challenged in many ways. But the idea of being offended at someone who was an eyewitness, even bringing forward what they saw, it's offensive to me as a thinker.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I was kind of curious of how this current politically correct culture and movement is going to deal with this one, because it seems now when you say words like Islamic extremism, you might be now looked at as a racist. And the social justice warriors and the feminists are now, anytime we try to talk about these things that do in fact happen, whether they're created, false flags or not, we have to be able to talk about these things. But it seems there's a culture of people who are trying to silence people like us from being able to have this kind of debate. What's your thoughts on the PC culture, and how they might react to this type of, an attack?
I think the PC culture is part of the impulsiveness, the controlling people through impulses, through a stimulus response. How are you going to react to the new fear-based this? How are you going to react to the attack? This person's offended. Are you going to side with them? And they've created buzz terms that they've poured energy into and told you can't say them, and tried to restrict speech, and ultimately not even so other people could chew you out, but so you will learn to self-censor and not think about things that are considered taboo. And we know that one of the oldest politically correct words is conspiracy theorist, not to mention tinfoil hat, words that they've loaded and connotated and presented in the media to immediately marginalize anyone who's thinking outside of the box, questioning events that have happened. And then on the other side of that, in social justice, we've really learned that we're supposed to be identity politic individuals, and somehow our worth as individuals is supposed to be stacked against, I guess, a horse race of how different groups of sex and race and other identities are doing, and you're supposed to be on your team or something, like it's a prison gang. And it's really bizarre to me. It's certainly not the culture I want to live in. And yet more and more words get loaded up. And at first, it's the idea of, well, let's be more tolerant. We've learned from slavery and we've learned from sexism, so let's treat people in a certain way. Fine, let's be tolerant of people. But it's getting to the point where you're supposed to preemptively not use words and clear out of the way and roll out a red carpet for groups. And it's going to an extreme of lemmings off of a cliff. And they're going to say words and you're going to jump and wonder how high, and you're not going to be able to have much of a deeper thought. Just saying one of these loaded terms from these identity groups it's just impulsive, really. It creates an automatic reaction, regardless of what side of the political fence you might find yourself on. And it's just really brutal to expression. It's creating a society that's not allowed to think. It's supposed to pre-categorize and sort itself and follow the lines. It's with the use of technology, it's becoming a more and more sophisticated tyranny of anything but free speech, really.
Well, speaking of the use of technology to essentially alter free speech or even take it away or change it, I mean, and we do have to be able to talk about these things. And if we want to try to explore the Brussels false flag, we want to be able to do that without being suppressed. And now, when you talk about false flags in this movement, you have all these other people who think everything's a hoax, that, the crisis actors were used and everything was faked and everything, the blood wasn't real. And, sometimes there may be some truth to that, but certainly not all the time. It's getting quite ridiculous. However, you guys at Truth Stream Media have just pointed out recently how the technology is advancing. And in fact, I want to show people a little bit of a clip that we have of you and Melissa did a video just the other day showing this fairly new technology where they can manipulate faces in essentially in real time on video, and now it's getting almost impossible to be able to tell what's real from what's not. So just check out this clip, and you'll see for yourself, folks, that at this stage in the game, they can manipulate anything into you believe in anything, and you almost can't take it at face value just because it's video. Here's the clip. Check this one out, and then when we'll be back, we'll talk about it with Aaron. Here's the clip.
We present a novel real-time facial reenactment method that works with any commodity webcam. Since our method only uses RGB data for both the source and target actor, we are able to manipulate YouTube videos in real time. Here we demonstrate our method in a live setup. On the right, a source actor is captured with a standard webcam. This input drives the animation of the face in the video shown on the monitor to the left.
Using face capture software, they're able to control basically a virtual puppet of anyone, complete with facial expressions, and make that person look like they are saying anything they want to, and it looks real.
And think about the difference here where you're seeing a U.S. leader and then in a moment when they show a foreign leader, and think about how different the implication is of showing a foreign leader who's a potential enemy looking silly versus our own U.S. leaders. And then think about how much the words and the buzz terms someone uses matter compared to body language. I mean, it's been estimated by scientists that 80-90% of what we perceive and what we think of another person, whether or not we trust them, whether or not we believe the words they're saying, depends upon body language and whether or not they seem like a trustworthy person. We've really learned to interpret what someone is saying based on the way they're expressing themselves. So look how much you can distort the message by hijacking someone's face. It's really uncanny and eerie. We've been living in a kind of consumer information matrix for a while. They really have distorted and manipulated reality. We know that things are framed on TV, but now with this technology, there's no way to know if you're seeing something that's real at all. And I guess they're going to try to give society schizophrenia, trying to figure out when they're in the real world or not.
Mind-boggling technology here. And you know, the fact that they are announcing this now, they probably had this technology for quite some time, and it's probably perfected even more so. But I mean, after watching something like that, can we trust or really believe anything we see from the TV anymore?
It's a pretty good time to just check yourself and pinch yourself and ask if you're in the matrix. Yeah. I don't know if you can disprove that. And the fact is they use persuasion and public opinion to drive a lot of the system. And we really do react to body language, to subconscious thoughts and movements about these misleaders that supposedly represent us. And I don't know if people could see that video, but some guy who looks nothing at all like Putin, he was like a heavy-set guy, and Putin's kind of medium build, was making him look like he was making ridiculous monkey faces. And just think what they would do if they could hijack your face in the middle of a press conference.
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah, that's true. You know, if they could apply this in real time, you know, in a live scenario, they could essentially get anybody to say anything. You know,
and how many buzzwords do you have to throw out now to get another group at your throat? We saw what happened in Mizzou. It could happen anywhere.
Yeah. So, oh man, it's scary, really. And then, and now we have people trying to manipulate our understandings of worldly events, of course, like what we're seeing now in Brussels, and we're seeing reactionary governments. What do you think about like the Canadian government now reacting to this? And we're seeing more police in the streets now, more police at the airport. They got bomb-sniffing dogs at the metro now today in Vancouver. Are you expecting to see more of this in other cities around the world? And what do you think of the increased police state as a response to this?
I think they've been wanting to do this for a while, but I think one of the reasons you're seeing it so strongly right now is, again, Putin's place on the world stage and the potential undermining of NATO. It has at least been theoretically threatened. The dollar has been challenged. A lot of important economic things are happening. oil has completely threatened to remap the geopolitical stage. And I think those who cast the terror want to make sure that the NATO and Anglo-American alliance is still alive and kicking, and kind of give a strong motivation to leaders, misleaders in Europe and Canada to stick with the pack here and not flip sides or go neutral, etc.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a bigger motivation than people have given it credit for.
And I'd have to agree with you about stepping back and seeing the bigger picture here, and in regards to what's going on geopolitically. I mean, we have this Syrian alleged ceasefire, but as you suggested, this is all leading towards the bigger potential war with Iran, right? I mean, that's essentially what getting through and taking down Syria's leader is essentially going to be all about, is leading towards an eventual takeover of Iran. Would you agree?
Yeah, and General Wesley Clark said it, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, that they had 7 countries back in the 90s, I think. He was told they were planning to take out. Iran was on that list. They've been on the list for as long as I've been politically aware, and they've been figuring out which path to Persia. Brookings Institute wrote a paper on that very topic, and they literally explore everything from having an ally attack them to having a country like Israel attack Iran first, to creating a velvet revolution, which they've tried in Iran, to using a domino state, Syria being the primary domino state. The idea that if you take out Syria, you're going to piss off Iran and there'll be no choice but to go to war. These things have fortunately stalled, but they're not going to give up. And you can only imagine that someone like a Hillary Clinton president is going to streamline that. And I don't think someone like Trump can be trusted not to go to war with Iran either. He's been pretty hostile on that footing, and it doesn't look good. It never has.
Yeah, well, then what do you think we can do, or what do people need to understand in order to try to turn this whole situation around? I mean, I'm wondering, moving forward, how can we break down the conditioning? How can we reverse the propaganda and get people to realize we don't have to go into the Middle East under humanitarian reasons, and that it's really just taking out of secular dictators to put in a system of controlled democracy here. How do we get people to understand this so that we don't have another attack? We don't have another false flag attack that's just going to take away people's rights. How do we turn this around in the minds of the masses?
It's a big road ahead. Of course, we're built in for fear as, physical creatures and, somewhat related to animals in our thinking, that if there's a threat, if there's a fear, that is designed to take over our thinking and be the number one priority. So the first thing you should do is realize that it's a tactic, step back and try to analyze it more coolly. And if it's a real threat, obviously take measures. But what we're dealing with is very large systems, national and global, who are perpetuating these threats. They're creating their own enemies. They figured out a long time ago that it's just a prerequisite for their power, and that populations are to be treated as sheep and so forth. And I don't think that strategy is completely invincible. In fact, if there's anything at all that's hopeful about what's happening with Trump and the Republican Party, it's that people have gotten tired of the policies. They've at least identified the group of people who've been consistently doing this for years and years, and at least expressed that they want to change. Now, are they going to get the change they want? Very doubtful. The system, it thinks ahead. It's very chess-like. But, ultimately, I think it's about taking back power and preserving the ability to think for yourself and do whatever you can to live your own life the way you think you need to do it. Try not to live inside the matrix, and things like voting aren't that helpful. You can't solve the problem with the problem.
And, people need to understand fundamentally what this all comes from is the fact that ISIS is a creation of the West. They were armed and trained and funded by the Western bankers and governments. Do you think people understand that, or are maybe starting to get that? I know people are they realize they're being lied to from the mainstream media, and they're looking to alternative sources for information. But do you think that people are really starting to grasp this concept yet, that the ISIS is a creation of the West, or do we still have a lot of work to do there as well?
There's more work, but I think a lot has been done. I think people are starting to hear about the bankers, whoever it is out there that's inclined to look this stuff up on the internet and question things. I think it's had a huge effect. At the same time, not over yet. We need to unmask it further. It's an uphill battle, as you know, because part of when you say the West, there are many countries, NATO and Canada and the Five Eyes states have all been complicit. But for my research, at the core, it's the axis of the UK British system, the Israel system, and the American system. And they've got unspoken deals going back at least a century to team up and continue what the British Empire has been doing for centuries and centuries, which has been in part to play the great game against Russia and compete for geopolitical territory by any means possible. They've had deception in their bag of tricks for longer than any of us have probably traced back the history.
Yeah, well, that's why we got to continue to just expose these things as we see them and for what they truly are. So, you know, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us to help us break it down today. And, you know, for some of the viewers, if you happen to be tuning in today because of the title of this video, you may be a little bit disappointed. I don't know, maybe you were expecting to see something else. But, you know, we have the hashtag, you know, Dicks and Dykes, and it's kind of a cheeky, kind of funny little thing. But you know what? It's because of these ridiculous PC SJW idiots who get offended by everything.
You know, in all seriousness, I've had my last name flagged inside of systems, purchasing things, and have not been allowed to buy things.
Really?
I think Macy's was one of the companies.
Really? I've had a lot
Considered a dirty word.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, well, yes, you and I apparently use dirty words all the time because it's right in our names. But anyways, you know, I wanted to put that in the title and the hashtag because it's just so ridiculous that that people are being so offended by the littlest of things, and it really boils down to free speech as well. If you're not offending, if you're not calling for violence or hurting anybody, you should be able to say it.
It's impulsive. Orwell he warned of the destruction of language, and when they destroy language, they destroy your consciousness. And if you can only respond according to nerve impulses on basic things that hit you on the most primal states, you can't think in higher thoughts.
Yeah. Yes. So it's pretty shocking that we're at this stage in the game, but here we are. But anyways, Aaron, I know you're a busy guy. I don't want to keep you any longer, but tell people, you know, where they can go to learn more from you guys. What are the websites? Where can they follow you? And what are all the links?
Yeah, we're at YouTube at TrueStream Media, and we also have TrueStreamMedia.com, and we're working on getting that website built up a little more, but expect good things from us in the future. We've been on a research project and really delving into the history, and we're putting some stuff together on that. I think people are going to want to see it. It has some to do with what we've been talking about tonight. And really, I just always find if you don't look back at history, you're not going to understand what's happening in the future, and you're going to remain in a fog, and you're just going to be responding to what they say on TV and these terms, and we've got to get past that.
Well, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. You know, I've always liked your work. I mean, a lot of people don't know I met you for the first time 10 years ago. You know, when we were covering
that's right.
When we were covering Bilderberg in Ottawa. So we go back quite a long ways. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the work that you guys are putting out, and I've loved what I've been seeing lately. So just want to say keep up the great work, and thanks for joining us here today, man.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Let's another Dick and Dykes combo anytime you want, I guess.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. Have a good one.
All right, folks. That was Aaron Dykes of Truth Stream Media and Dicks and Dykes together at last here on Press for Truth Live. So on that note, I suppose we'll call it a show for the evening, folks. I want to thank you. I want to remind you, too, to support our efforts here at Press for Truth, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/pressfortruth. We'll have links in the description to even $1 a month helps to put on productions like this. I also want to give a shout out to one of our new sponsors, Skunk Beard Concentrates. This is one of the finest producers of medical grade extracts here in Vancouver, and they are now part of the team here at PFT, so we're very happy about that. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you once again for tuning in, and I want to hopefully see you right back here next week, same time, same channel. Until then, keep fighting the good fight, my friends.